So let's say for my egg, this counts for the tree stump too. I'm sure you can easily imagine how they would apply. It's the same situation. If you've got your object already selected with a layer mask, I am all about being lazy. And what I mean by lazy is figuring out how to work smarter, not harder. If you've already done a job once, why reinvent the wheel? You should be able to use that multiple times, the effort that you did the first time. What I mean by that is if I've already spent time making a good selection around my object in order to make a layer mask, I'm not going to then go and make a new version of that selection. I can just hold control. And I want everybody to try this, whether or not you're trying the shadow, because I want you to know this is a possibility. If you hold control and then you mouse over your black and white layer mask, a little icon shows up next to your cursor. It's a box with a dotted edge. That stands for selection. When I'm holding control and I click on my black and white layer mask, it reactivates that selection. What's nice is that you can then use that edge for other things. Like for instance here, I can use that edge to help me make a shadow. So with my selection reactivated, I'm going to make a new blank layer. There's nothing on this layer, but I can use the selection that I just reactivated as like a stencil for my shadow. What I don't want to do if I'm going to go make a shadow, I don't want to paint so that it goes over Big Bird and the shell. There's not going to be a shadow on the shell. That's not what I want. I want to keep my shadow contained just to where Big Bird is because the egg is casting a shadow on the object inside. So that's why I'm reactivating my selection. I've got to make some changes to my brush though. Shadows generally don't have a hard edge unless there's a really hard light source. It's really close by. I won't get into the mechanics of how light works, but generally for a shadow, you're going to want a soft edge on your brush. I'm also going to turn down my brush opacity because this is just going to be too strong. This does not look realistic. It looks like he's at a like FBI interrogation with a shadow and a light that harsh. So I'm going to up at the top in my options panel, turn my opacity of my brush down. You can experiment with this. I'm going to try like 20% at first. I'm going to make my brush bigger. I don't care if I paint outside the edges because that selection is going to keep my painting inside that area. So once you've done the proper setup, a shadow is super easy. Look at, I'm just going to go across the top of where Big Bird is. And you can see that it's keeping my shadow. I'm going to make mine a little more dramatic so you can see it easily on the board. You'd probably want to take a softer approach, but you can see that it's only applying that shadow to where is inside of that selection. Now, obviously, I don't want to put a shadow over the whole Big Bird, but I can just gently like graze across the top of where he is, and it's going to use that selection as a stencil or like a bumper. Like if you're bowling and there's like those bumpers on the edges of the lane, it's going to keep your brush inside that area. So the stuff that we're going to get into, I'll do a quick preview for anyone who's like really into it, wants to like jump ahead a bit. We'll go back over this stuff in the future, but if you really want your shadow to kind of blend into Big Bird, at the top of your layers panel, there's this little thing that says normal. It's right next to opacity. These are called your blending modes. I'm kind of giving away a little hint for the future. But your blending modes allow you to determine how your layers blend together. So on normal mode, they don't really blend. But if I've made a shadow and I want to explore ways to have that shadow kind of interact with Big Bird a little differently, you can see that there's some options that will blend that color into Big Bird rather than it just being black. So I want you to, if you are trying to make a shadow, experiment maybe with some of those blending modes. There are some that might work a little better than others. And it'll depend on the image and what you're using. So it's going to be different every time, but blending modes are a thing. So once you've made a shadow just with like black or whatever color you want to use, you can change the blending mode as well to see maybe there's an option that you like a little better. You can also make a duplicate and have these layers like interact differently with different opacities. So you can start to kind of like really layer things on top of each other. You can go as far with it as your imagination can take you. We're just kind of doing some of the basics so folks don't get overwhelmed. But if you really want to go like hardcore with this, I'm always happy to show you some other techniques to make your stuff look a little more realistic. So for anyone that wanted to try the shadow, that's what I would suggest. If you saw the demo, but you're like, wait, how do I actually do that? I'm happy to come by and give you some reminders. I'll keep floating around seeing how people are doing, but I'll leave this up as kind of an example or reminder of the shadow. Let me stop the recording.